Okay, let's dive right into this explainer with a seriously provocative thought. The idea that we no longer live our lives directly, but instead, we just watch representations of them. I mean, take a second and really think about that. How much of your actual daily experience is mediated by a screen, a brand, or an image? Well, that is the exact core premise we're unpacking today.
Welcome to our explainer on Guy Debord's notorious 1967 philosophical text, The Society of the Spectacle. Now, full disclosure, this is a dense, heavily Marxist critique of modern capitalism. But here's the thing, regardless of where you fall on the political spectrum, Debord offers a genuinely fascinating lens for viewing our hyper-connected, media-saturated lives. We're going to break down his complex theories into a clear framework so we can figure out what he actually means by the spectacle.
Because his theory is frankly incredibly abstract, we've structured our exploration into 5 digestible steps: defining the spectacle, looking at the world as a commodity, exploring false illusions, diving into the theft of our time, and finally exploring his ideas on reclaiming historical life.
All right, let's jump straight into part 1, the spectacle defined.
So when you hear the word spectacle, it's super common to immediately think of, mass media, television screens, or flashy billboards. But Debord argues that the spectacle isn't just visual excess. It's not just a bunch of pictures. It is a fundamental social relationship. He argues that genuine, direct human connection has basically been swapped out. Instead of relating to each other directly, our relationships are now filtered, mediated by images, brands, and representations. For Debord, the spectacle is literally a worldview that has materialized into objective reality to become our entire way of life.
Moving right along to Section 2, the world as commodity.
To explain how we got here, the text claims that human reality went through a historical downgrade in 3 distinct steps. Back in the day, human fulfillment was defined simply by being, just who you were in your community. But once the economy started to totally dominate social life, that downgraded into having. Your worth was suddenly tied to what you owned. And finally, we arrive at our modern spectacular stage, the shift to appearing. Because we live in a society overflowing with economic productions, all that having must now get its prestige purely from appearances. Think about it. If you buy a luxury car or post a heavily filtered vacation photo, it's not even really about the experience itself anymore, right? It's about the prestige that appearance projects to everybody else.
And that leads right into his core economic argument, which is perfectly summed up in this one quote. As the capitalist economy completely colonizes our social life, the absolute sheer abundance of commodities morphs into a visual landscape that dictates reality. Capital isn't just invisible money in a bank or machinery in a factory anymore. It accumulates and spreads globally as tangible, heavily marketed objects and images. The world we see is entirely the world of the commodity.
Which brings us to Section 3, false choices and illusions. Now, Debord breaks down how this actually operates differently depending on the political system you're in. Under what he calls the concentrated spectacle, so think totalitarian regimes or dictatorial police states, the masses are essentially forced to magically identify with a single absolute leader, or they face violence. Contrast that with the diffuse spectacle of modern consumer capitalism. This one relies on commodity abundance. We're presented with seemingly endless choices between competing products or competing political policies. But, and this is a big but, the text argues those choices are totally illusory. Competing commodities actually just reinforce one single unified capitalist system. The lack of any real, meaningful choice is basically hidden behind the glittering abundance of stuff.
And guess who the ultimate tool of this system is? The celebrity. Public figures act as these stars who project a kind of general banality into permitted roles. Basically, they're superficial objects we identify with to mask the fact that we don't have any real historical power ourselves. They get to act out permitted lifestyles and embody the inaccessible results of social labor, meaning they get to enjoy the ultimate power and permanent vacations that everyday workers literally built but are completely denied. By idolizing these stars, we're distracted from our own mundane lives and end up accepting a system that offers absolutely no true individuality.
Let's look at Section 4, the theft of time. This part is fascinating because it's all about how we experience our own lives. Originally, human societies lived in cyclical time. That was ancient time, based on the static, seasonal rhythms of farming and agricultural societies, just a continuous cycle of repetitive tasks. But with the rise of capitalist mass production, society shifted into irreversible time. This is linear, historical time. It's driven by relentless economic development and harsh change that just crushes old traditions.
But here is the catch. Instead of letting everyday people actually live and create in that linear historical time, we get sold back what Debord calls pseudo-cyclical time, basically a consumable disguise. We spend our lives grinding away in the production system, but our actual experience of life is reduced to these artificial manufactured cycles: the 9-to-5 routine, the weekend, the classic 2-week vacation. Our time is chopped up into consumable blocks.
So what we call leisure or free time, Debord just calls it augmented survival. It's a profound point, really. Modern leisure isn't liberation from work. Your free time is still totally dependent on the production system. We just use our time off to consume the exact images, entertainments, and commodities that the system churns out, like mindlessly scrolling social media on a Sunday. It's a total illusion of freedom that just keeps us passively submitting to the whole machinery of the spectacle.
Finally, let's hit Section 5, Reclaiming Historical Life.
Now, before he offers any sort of solution, Debord ruthlessly and neutrally critiques past ideological movements. He says, look, historical anarchism was great at rejecting existing conditions, sure, but it was just an abstract ideal. It had no practical method for real change. Then he goes after orthodox Marxism and Bolshevism, arguing that the Russian Revolution completely failed because it literally just swapped the old capitalist ruling class for a brand new, oppressive, totalitarian bureaucracy. The working class was still entirely alienated from any actual power, just forced to submit to the concentrated spectacle of the state.
So, what's his alternative? How do you actually shatter the spectacle? Debord proposes the formation of workers' councils. This would be a system fundamentally designed to give historical power back to everyday people. It relies on direct, unmediated communication, completely cutting out the images and representations that divide us. The goal is the absolute eradication of hierarchy. Decisions would be made directly by everyday producers using delegates who are strictly answerable and can be immediately revoked. For Debord, this goes way beyond just managing a factory. It is about literally tearing down the screens and the middlemen so people can finally, authentically talk to one another directly.
So, as we wrap up this explainer of Debord's dense, challenging, but ultimately profound worldview, we're left with a pretty heavy question. The next time you look at your screens, your shopping cart, or even your daily routine, you have to ask yourself, are we actively participating in our lives and writing our own history? Or are we just passive spectators, comfortably watching a manufactured illusion that we've somehow mistaken for reality? Thanks for diving into this incredibly fascinating text with me, and I hope it gives you a powerful new way to see the world around you.